Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. It is the Illinicast, and we are on episode 3. Can you believe it, Sonny?
3. Wow, we're older than my kids now.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
We've hit toddler stage, right?
Yes, and we're gonna hit teenage stage here before we even know it, because football season is almost upon us, and that's gonna update our frequency a little bit more.
No, I can't wait. No, it's I think we saw it with like 27 days till kickoff or something like that. So I got my Illinois football tickets in the email yesterday, so I'm excited about that. That tells you that the season's right around the corner.
I got my parking, so that's going to be nice. At least I'll have a place to park. I'm just waiting on the ticket email. So, but it's hard to believe we're actually going to be talking about football after these crazy couple weeks.
Thank God. I mean, I'm over it. I say I hate it, and yet I spend nights, for an hour or two just responding to these major college football accounts, responding, giving my thoughts, and I just want to talk football. I want to talk opening day. I want to talk Toledo. I want to talk Penn State, and I want to talk Big Ten football. What about you, Austin?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Because I mean, it is so frustrating to hear about what's going to happen in 2024 when there's still a whole nother year of college football. There's a whole nother year of college basketball, and there's a whole other year of non-revenue sports and that awesome spring season ahead of us. And it feels like this season it's so historic, but yet people are just kind of poo-pooing it in a way too.
Yeah, I mean, we have, possibly, 3 top 6 teams in the Big Ten conference like that could be going to the college playoff.
Hmm.
There's a lot of good talent in the Big Ten, and obviously, with 4 teams entering next year, that's kind of where the focus point has been. But me, as an Illinois fan, the idea that we have a team that I'm excited about that could win the Big Ten West division, and make that Big Ten championship game. I just kind of that time will come. 2024 will come. Let me enjoy
Hmm.
2023 for a little bit.
Let's have one more Apple Cup. Let's have one more Civil War. Let's have one last year of Bedlam. Let's get all of this historic season underway. And with that comes preview season. And this episode, we're going to preview the Big Ten East, and then we have an interview with Eric, the Ohio State Big Banter podcast, a foe of ours or friend, whatever it is. Maybe
I
it's a
mean,
friend right now, and then a foe possibly in December.
it was pretty friendly, and yeah, I
Yes.
like that idea. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because I feel like that could be an opponent that we have in the state of Indiana near the end of the year.
I love it.
Uh,
Sign me up.
exactly. Great interview. And again, the Illinicast is part of the Big Banter podcast network. Can't forget to mention that we have a great podcast network of great Big Ten hosts and guests, and can't wait to get more involved in those relationships with the fellow podcasts.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, especially come football season. We'll be able to kind of collaborate with the different team podcast and, review what happened in the game before and preview the ones coming up. So it'll be a nice little bit of trash talk back and forth. Hopefully, we'll be on the giving end as opposed to the receiving end this year.
Absolutely. And I think that's Brett Bielema's plan. But Illinois is not in the Big Ten East, but we do have a few opponents in the Big Ten East this year. Our first Big Ten game will be against Penn State. That'll be at Memorial Stadium in Champaign on September 16th. Then we take on Maryland in College Park. That's going to be on October 14th. And then we play Indiana on November 11th. That'll be a huge revenge game in Champaign after last year's debacle of defense and officiating. And we'll get to all of that right now. So, Sonny, who is your last place Big Ten East team?
I have Rutgers finishing last.
Okay.
Shiano's doing his best. He's trying. I know. I think I saw like they had 7 straight bottom 5 offensive performances, like in the P5 conferences. Last year, their offense was second to last. They can't figure out the offense. You know, all their top three wide receivers left this year. So, I mean, does it get better? Does it get worse? They got some solid running backs, a couple of freshmen, and offense is gonna be tough. You know, their defense was nice. I think they had like a top 10 defensive improvement, but it's just tough playing in that Big Ten East where you have three guaranteed losses. You have other teams that we're going to reference a little bit later, and you feel bad for them because they've lost their team MVP, their superstar punter, Adam Kursak, I think it was. I don't know if you watched any Rutgers games last year, but like the crowd would literally applaud when he entered the games. So how do you replace your most productive player? It's just unfortunate for Rutgers. It's their punter.
Yeah, my last place team is Indiana. I mean, Tom Allen, you either have to be entrenched in tradition in the Big Ten or you have to be ultra innovative. And Tom Allen just is not that. So I think Indiana is in a place where I don't know if he's necessarily on the hot seat or not, but he's got to get it going, especially with the added competition coming in next year. Um, there's just not a huge margin of error for the Indiana Hoosiers. And I mean, they have a lot of transfers coming in, but their defense gave up 33.9 points per game last year, and they only returned two of those starters. So it's going to be a fresh new system for a lot of new guys to learn and to develop in. And I just don't see that happening. So he had a great 2019 and 2020 stretch, but is that really going to take place again? I don't think so. Ohio State's stronger, Michigan's stronger. Michigan State seems to be stabilized at this point. In 2019 and 2020, they weren't the Michigan State that we all know who they are. So I think Indiana's in deep trouble. Who is your number 6 team in the Big Ten East?
Let's see. Actually, I had Indiana here. I had
Okay.
Rutgers last, and then Indiana. For me, Indiana, you know, the two teams we basically discussed at this point, Rutgers and Indiana, show you just how important finding a quarterback is in college football. They've been in a rut. Like I think I saw that they're losing 30 seniors, and but for Indiana, is that a bad thing? They brought in 25 new transfers, so I'm almost trying to look at the glass half full aspect that, yeah, you lost so much talent, but you lost a lot of talent on a bad team.
Mm-hmm.
So I he made they have co-defensive coordinators now. I was reading about the other gentleman. He's a former Broyles Award winner, so he can coach defense. But is it too late? Like you said, at this point, does Kevin Allen lose his job? Because you'd assume he'd have to pretty much make a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to happen. Like, it's now or never for Indiana. And if you're Indiana, you have a great Big Ten budget. You can possibly steal a coach from the Pac 12, the ACC, and even the Big 12 because we're in a two super conference league in college football right now. So if you're Indiana, you have a chance to upgrade that coach pretty quickly because you can say you can coach in the top conference and be stable where you are for at least a few years in the number one conference in terms of money in the Big Ten. So you'll have the resources. If you're Indiana, there's just no reason to settle for what Tom Allen is giving you year to year.
No, I mean, Indiana has the least amount of wins in the last 100 years. I think they're like the second worst football program in the history of college football or something along those lines. And yet, sitting here today, a lot of good coaches would want that job
Yeah.
for the reasons you said so. It's gonna, with the P2 forming, it's going to have money and budgets that other programs that are considered a lot stronger than Indiana football is, that they'd be envious of.
I mean, Oregon State, I don't know who their coach is right now. I got to be honest, but they are supposed to make at least some noise in the Pac 12 this upcoming year. And if Tom Allen struggles, why not just bring the Oregon State coach over? Because he might not want to coach in the Mountain West. He'll have a shot at the Big Ten. That's just one example, and pure just speculation because we have a full football season ahead of us. But I mean, that's the kind of power that the Big Ten will have in gaining coaches in the future.
Yeah, or even like established coaches in other conferences.
Yeah.
Like Wake Forest Clawson, who I think is a fantastic coach. If I were Northwestern, I would go gung ho after him. He was one of the guys I like for Illinois. Yeah, he's got a cushy little gig at Wake Forest in the ACC, but he can make a significant more uh, amount of money at Indiana with the Big Ten budgets. So we're talking from a point of view of spoils, but we made, in my opinion, a home run hire with Brett
Hmm.
Bielema, and to all the Indiana fans listening to this, I guess we're just trying to say that there is optimism to look forward to. All you need to do is make that one good hire.
Yep, the grass is possibly greener on the other side because it's not this. It's not being a lower class Big Ten team when you are the Indiana Hoosiers. The Indiana State as a whole has a lot of great high school football in it, and if you can't tap into that, that's a huge problem. So if you
Mhm.
get a coach that has that some recruiting juice and gets an exciting staff around him, the sky's the limit. Illinois has shown that by making this bowl game last year and actually having momentum on its side. Once momentum dies in college football on your in your organization, you can't get it back. It is
Mhm.
so difficult because recruits start to look elsewhere. They start
Mhm.
to look at your sister schools, like your brother schools, quote like a Purdue or like a Cincinnati, even. So there's not a lot of room for margin of error right now for Tom Allen. You got to harness that momentum as best as you can this year.
That's right. Okay, so we got what I perceive to be the two worst programs out of the way in the Big Ten East. Who do you got next?
I had Rutgers 6, by the way. I think just
Oh,
because Greg
okay.
Schiano has an identity and
Hmm.
Tom Allen does not, I think he's a hard nosed kind of Brett Bielema style coach. Run the ball, great defense is his staple. So I think with Kyle Monange as their running back, I think that's going to be the difference between Indiana and Rutgers finishing dead last in that Big Ten East. Going to number 5, I think I got to go with just a question mark uh, of a high ceiling, but also a low floor, and that's the Michigan State Spartans, because I just feel like they are always transfer happy, which that's fine in today's world of college football, but you just never know how those groups are going to coexist. I think they're head and shoulders better than Rutgers and Indiana right now, but the schools that we're going to be talking above them, it's I don't believe they have it in them to pass those schools up. Maybe my number 4 coming up, but I think that's where they're at. They're going to beat up on the lower tier teams, then get beat up on by the Michigans and Ohio States and Penn States of the world.
Yeah, and I had Michigan State at 5 too. And in the East, it used to be the Big Four, and
Hmm.
now Michigan State is clearly a tier below. They're battling in the mid-level with what I'm assuming is going to be both yours and mine, number 14. And the transfer portal giveth, but in Michigan State's case this year, it also taketh away. They after spring ball, they lost their potential 2-year starter, Peyton Thorne, at quarterback, and they lost who they thought was going to be their next great wide receiver. Was it Keon Coleman? I think his name was.
Hmm.
Yeah, he surprised a lot of people when after spring ball he transferred over to Florida State. So I
It's
know.
almost like an Addison situation, Jordan Addison
Uh,
situation of USC there.
yeah, yeah, and I know Mel Tucker talked about this being his best incoming transfer class he's ever had, but I mean he's playing with fire here. You know.
I mean, Michigan State ranked 12th in the Big Ten in rush defense last year. And what do you have to do to win in the Big Ten? You got to stop the run, and you got to be able to run the ball. So stopping the run is very difficult for them, and their secondary is going to be a little shoddy with a lot of transfers coming in. So when you look at who is in the Big Ten East, Marvin Harrison of Ohio State, JJ McCarthy of Michigan. I mean, those kind of stats give me a lot of pause for how Michigan State is going to do in this Big Ten.
Yeah, just another frustrating loss for us last year. Wish we had taken care of business over them
I
last year,
mean,
but
I mean, the supposed underachievers of this year's Big Ten are most gut wrenching losses
I,
in Michigan State and in Indiana. Like our offense just they turned off the valve of water in those two games, like at
we were so
points.
close. We were so close. I mean, that
Yes.
Indiana, not to go back on it, but we're talking about an awful call by the referees, which the entire world was watching. I think it was an ESPN game.
Yep.
Yeah, but
So
mhm.
I have a funny story quickly about that Indiana game. I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with my then fiance and a couple of her friends. So we're like, let's just go to a sports bar. Let's get some food. It's getting kind of late. So we pile into the sports bar, and then all of a sudden, a huge rush of Indiana fans pile in. Apparently, we were at Pittsburgh's Indiana Hoosier Bar, and I was just feeling miserable that entire dinner. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, all these Indiana Hoosier fans are just, hanging around celebrating everything, and especially that call." I was like, "I gotta leave,
uh,
babe. We gotta get to our Airbnb right now. This is ridiculous. I am livid." I had to calm myself down with a few glasses of water there.
I would have calmed myself down with a few glasses of something else, probably, but probably would have gotten kicked out at that point.
I would have probably got a little bit saucy with the
Yeah,
Indiana
yeah.
fans,
I think you made the right choice.
I'd have been like, "Guys, remember that layup, Tyler Griffey? Hey, remember that?"
Right. Well,
At that point, Trace Jackson Davis hasn't beaten Illinois. How about that?
you manhandled by no player in the world was happier that Kofi went pro than
Yes.
Trace. Yeah. All right, but back to
Back to
football.
the list. Who do you have at number 4?
I have Maryland. Mike Loxley. I'm gonna circle back to a point I was making earlier. He it's Maryland has shown how important it is to get a good quarterback in your system. I'm not going to try to say his name. I fumbled through it every single time. Talia Taglia
Tabalia
Tagli.
Tungliavola.
Okay, yes,
Yes.
he. Bringing him in basically not only brought some publicity to Maryland, but it also brought the skill players when it comes to recruiting. People want to play with a quarterback like that. That's kind of how Maryland has, gone from being in the Rutgers and Indiana level of the Big Ten and slowly started graduating up to, a pretty solid middle tier in the Big Ten. And, in other conferences, they could be higher, but they just happen to be in the same one with three, giant programs. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult with them, especially when you have to rebuild on the trenches, and that's something that Mike Loxley had to do this year. And again, when you're dealing with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, that is not an easy task to say, "Hey, do you guys want to go up against the best edge rushers each for 3 weeks out of the year in the country?" The answer most likely is no. They want to be on those teams, so they just have to deal with them in practice and not get embarrassed on Saturdays.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be happier than them once we get rid of the divisions in the Big Ten. Just it, like you said, but they made good defensive hires. Their defensive coordinator, who I think they like gave a trial run to, he aced his um, test. Essentially, I think I saw that they after halftime adjustments that they had left. They had less than 10 points scored on them after a half in 9 of 13 games. And that just means, your defensive coordinator, who again was in his first full season, was making good adjustments. That's, kind of what you want. They were ranked 24th out of 69 Power Five teams, which again, for Maryland, that's what they just need an average defensive team because, they've got the offensive skill talent, they've got the quarterback, all Big Ten second team. If they can have an average defensive side of the football, again, in any other conference, they could have be competing. In here, they are a solid four for me.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this kind of tier of Michigan State and Maryland. It's like the 6-6 kind of teams. Like you're just trying to make that bowl game. I feel like those are the two kind of tiers uh, that we've dealt with: the bottom feeders, and then you have the bowl hopefuls or the big bowl hopefuls, I guess, or not. new- Basically, status below the New Year's Six, essentially.
Hmm.
So you look at Tawalia, I feel like that's going to help propel them to maybe an upset over a team like Penn State in a way, because we've seen it before in college football that if that quarterback really gets going, especially using his legs, and you have to start having quarterback spies at the linebacker position, then you can carve them up in the middle of the field with your passing game. So I feel like they could steal one, but everything's going to have to go right for the Maryland Terrapins in that particular game. But I mean, I got to give credit to Michael Oxley for what he's done. I mean, that DC area was great for the Illini back in the 2007 world of Illinois football. And he's brought that juice back to the DC area for the Terrapins. And that's been kind of why they've propelled further against the Indianas and the Rutgers and even Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, I applauded the hire as an Illinois fan when Maryland hired him because I didn't think he was that good of a head coach. I just thought maybe he had found his role as one of the top offensive coordinators in the country.
Hmm.
Um, what do you win like one or two games or something like that at New Mexico? In his previous run, but he's shown the way he's kind of rebuilt this Maryland program that he knows what he's doing.
Right.
Obviously he still needs to work on the trenches and especially for this conference, but his system is working and we're kind of seeing it. So instead of, what I thought was going to be just another program that needed to hire a new coach in 3, 4 years, I think Maryland has found their guy for the foreseeable future.
All right. Who is your number three?
Now this gets interesting now. I think, because you have three teams who I would not be surprised if you went 1, 2, 3 with either of them. And to be honest, like my 1, 2, 3 changed right up before we recorded this podcast. So I'm just gonna blurt this out. My number three is Ohio State.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and strictly because the quarterback situation, as we'll get to a little later with Eric from the OHIO podcast. They can't seem to figure out who they want to start at quarterback, whereas Michigan's got McCarthy and Penn State obviously has Drew Aller, who I'm assuming we might be talking about very soon. They got the position players. They got their defense was had a great run last year up until the second half of the last regular season game where Michigan basically ran roughshod over them. I think people are getting a little antsy. Ohio State fans are getting a little antsy. The pressure on Ryan Day is slowly starting to get there. Um, Whoever the next quarterback is, it doesn't look like it's a clear talent above like what Justin Fields was or C.J. Stroud was, and obviously they got an insane wide receiver room. But again, I say that they're going to finish third in the Big Ten division, but I can also see them winning the national championship. So it kind of shows you how deep and strong that the top of this division is.
Yeah, my number three, I do have Penn State. I love Drew Aller as the quarterback, but they have some wide receiver questions coming into this year, and I feel like you gotta. This is kind of crazy to say, but in the Big Ten East, you gotta score some points. You gotta find people who catch the ball. I know they got a Kent State transfer, but I think they are squarely at number three, especially with the talent on the offensive line with Olu Fashanu. He's going to be a first round pick on the left side, anchoring that Penn State offensive line. And their defense has some great skill kind of players as well in their linebacker and secondary core. So I think this Penn State team is going to be really good. But until I see from James Franklin some extreme consistency of beating the top teams week after week after week. I just can't put them number one or two based on a game planning edge that I feel like Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh have.
Yeah, I mean, I like Penn State too. Or yeah, I mean, I like Penn State as my number two. I think Aller could quite possibly be the most important player in college football this year. If he rises to the level that um, his ceiling projects to, I think Penn State, from top to bottom, has the potential to not only win the conference, but make it to the college football playoff and compete. This is James Franklin's best team that he's had at Penn State. They're loaded everywhere, and so you know, I guess I'm kind of guessing, or my forecast is saying that he does become above average quarterback. He played well last year. Um, even while Clifford was breaking every Penn State passing record, career passing record, he was still getting booed sometimes just because people wanted to see the young hotshot 5-star. And so for me, if James Franklin is going to have his year, I know, there's always been rumors about him wanting to leave for the USC job or this or that. The state of Pennsylvania had a really strong recruiting cycle the last couple of years, so they've loaded up. I think they had like the number 6 recruiting class last year or the year before. They've got a lot of talent on that team, and I personally am going to lean towards James Franklin being a good coach. I really like what he did at Vanderbilt. So if I believe that about James Franklin, and if I think that Drew Aller can be an above average quarterback, my hot take is going to be that they finish second in the division.
That's fair. I like it. My number two is Ohio State. I wanted to pull the trigger as the number one team in the Big Ten East, but the quarterback questions remain. I do have the number two above Penn State for another reason, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. I mentioned that on the pod before, but whenever I watched Alabama um, with him, Devontae Smith was a game breaker, game wrecker that no defensive coordinator really knew how to stop. And Marvin Harrison Jr. plays a very different style, but he has that same game breaking ability. And I feel like defensive coordinators are going to rip their hair out trying to contain him in the Big Ten. Heck, if he doesn't get injured, I think they beat Georgia and then they beat TCU by a ton to win the national championship. So I love Marvin Harrison, but I do feel like there's questions, and Eric alluded to this as well, on their offensive line. And I feel like they don't have the deepest team that they've ever had. So that leads me to some concerns about finishing number one in the conference. But I feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. won't let them lose and become the third place team in this Big Ten East.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. As you kind of alluded to, if Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt in that game, like they would have beaten an arguably a dynasty level Georgia team.
Yep.
I mean, they had the momentum. Everything kind of changed after that point. So I can absolutely see what you're saying. And apparently, they've got younger guys in that wide receiver room who are almost just as good, as we're going to hear about a little later. It's they're kind of spoiled over there in Columbus, but you know, I think it comes down to that offensive line, that quarterback. Michigan's got maulers on that defensive line, and they've done it the last couple of years, and they're going to try to beat them up and out physical Ohio State on the lines this year. And that's what kind of keeps me from putting them over what I assume is going to be yours and my top team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ohio State and the way they're recruiting in recent stretches where guys from the Midwest aren't necessarily picking them right away. They are going to Penn State. They are going to Notre Dame. They are going to Michigan. And their national recruiting, the talent has migrated to the South.
Mhm.
So a lot of guys are picking Texas. A lot of guys are picking Georgia. A lot of guys are still picking Alabama. Like there are some instances where this is very anecdotal, but I see them sign like a few 3 stars where I'm like, hmm, that's interesting. I would not have pegged them to sign guys like that this early on in a process. So it is kind of interesting to see how Ryan Day has taken a step back from recruiting because he was on the hottest streak imaginable on the recruiting trail. Now it feels like they're struggling a little bit at other positions not named wide receiver.
I do wonder how much the new rules with NIL has to do with it. Ohio State, like, we've had Ryan Day talk about how, his boosters, need an X amount of $1 million a year. And, with the teams down south, the ones that you name, Texas, Auburn, Alabama, they're just giving you blank checks. You let us know how much you need, they're writing them up. From what I gathered, Ryan Day and the Ohio State staff, they make more of an effort to try to solicit money, and make it known that, hey, in order to compete in recruiting in the modern game, money matters. And so I wonder if, Ohio State, they're still obviously recruiting amazingly, but there's other programs where now that the rules have become not rule, the rules have changed essentially, where money becomes into a factor. I think a lot of the guys that Ohio State was originally getting before are now considering the Texas type of programs, and some of those programs down south who kind of always looked the other way to begin with when it came to money.
Absolutely. So number one, we both have the University of Michigan left on the board. And give me your reasons why you think they're winning this conference, or at least this division.
Yeah, you know, if we'd recorded this podcast yesterday, I would have had Penn State winning the division, and that was going to be my hot take. Like, that's what I want to do, surprise everyone. And then now I see it on podcasts showing up. Look out for Penn State. Twitter, accounts are throwing out, Penn State's the sleeper of the year. So it's like I wanted to go against the grain, but now that people are actually picking Penn State, I was like, somehow Michigan became undervalued. I mean, this is a team that has dominated the last 2 years, and usually when you perform very well, when you go to a national championship game, or and then follow it up with another college football playoff game, you're losing a lot of talent. Somehow Michigan's bringing it all back. So they're another year older. Their star young quarterback gets another year of experience. Their recruiting has reached levels it has never reached before under Harbaugh. They're a bunch of mullets. They're the Big Ten personified. They'll out physical you. They're going to beat teams up. But also in this case, unlike the Illinois, the Wisconsins, the Iowas who beat you up, they're doing it with 4 and 5 star guys now. And so, for me, it's just, I know this is a super lazy answer, but I can't look past them. Like, until Ohio State can figure it out, or that's probably the biggest game of the year this year, besides the game, is Michigan visits Penn State at Penn State.
Hmm.
So that's gonna be a must-watch game. I'm gonna be tuned into that one, and yeah, for me, it's just I wanted to go off with the sexy pick, but truth be told, I think it's Michigan's to lose.
I mean, I will give some pause though. Michigan did lose their star kicker, who, if he missed, Illinois wins. And then who knows what happens in the college football world. Again, more pain for Illinois fans here. But
Yeah, this podcast was a lot tougher to record than I imagined.
the Big Ten West will strangely be easier. Um,
Yeah.
but but you look at Michigan, 7 starters return on their defense. They have the best running back duo in the country with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They return JJ McCarthy, who may be in New York City at the end of the season
Mhm.
holding up a trophy. And Jim Harbaugh has done great. Their offensive line is one of the top 5 in the country. it's a team with the recipe to win a national title. It's a team with the similar recipe of like Georgia whenever they started out their ascent to upend Alabama. Um, I don't know if Michigan has the juice that Georgia does just because of the
Right.
regionality of it, but it is looking like a Diet Coke version of Georgia. And I think they can compete in one game against Georgia and potentially beat them. We saw it with Ohio State last year, and I think Michigan could potentially do it in this year's semifinal or final, wherever it is. So I think Michigan is a powerhouse, a behemoth that should scare these 4 teams coming into the Big Ten next year because I think they're all staring down Ohio State and Columbus, Ohio. But I think Michigan is the true bully that they need to watch out for whenever they come to the big house starting in 2024.
Yeah, it's funny, just kind of thinking about it. Michigan, I think, is clearly the most talented team up and down from 1 to 85. They're I have them winning the division, but it's funny, like you just talking about conference or college football playoffs, and beat taking on the Georgias. The team I think that would have the best chance of winning the national title and competing with the SEC teams is the team I picked to finish third in the division. I just it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, Ohio State has the speed and the playmakers, and Michigan might this year. Especially if JJ makes that another leap. I think he with a strong season he can be a pretty high NFL draft pick. So it's again it just shows you that 1-2-3 could have been 3-2-1, could have been 2-3-1. When it comes to the top of this division.
And I think one thing we're discounting, especially with all the talent they return, is they have a chip on their shoulder. And a
Mm.
team that good shouldn't necessarily have a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah,
But the way their season ended against TCU, when everybody and their mother was picking Michigan to just
I
violently
lost a lot of
destroy the
money on
Horned
that game,
Frogs.
Austin.
Yes, yes, a lot of people did. I
Oh my
seemed
gosh.
watching Twitter that night was rather funny because just people were like, Michigan, we had you like at an alternate point spread and
Right,
everything."
right, right.
And
I kept
it,
live betting. Oh no, no, they'll come back. They'll come back. So I didn't think it would be tougher to hate Michigan more than I already do, and especially after that loss that we had to them last year. But when they took my money from me last year too, it's just there's just nothing I like about that program.
I mean, as an Illini fan, I know I'm not really supposed to say this, but the Michigan players, at least, they are a very likable bunch of Wolverines, which
Yeah,
is crazy to say. Like Ohio State is turned into kind of like the villain. So Michigan is like that new kid on the block of like,
right.
hey guys, and they upended Ohio State a couple years in a row, and now it's like, okay, they're firmly in this national title picture. Something I didn't think I'd necessarily say 4 to 6 years ago when Harbaugh was somehow on a hot seat in Michigan
Right,
fans' minds and national analysts' minds, and especially in the Big Ten side where they were like, "Oh, they haven't beat Ohio State 3 years
right.
in a row, so is he going to be gone?" I mean, it's just crazy how things look differently. Like if Illinois was in Michigan's shoes, then it would be like party all night, party all day, every year. And with Michigan, it's like, okay, you didn't beat Ohio State, hot seat.
Yeah, it's because he was doing fine otherwise. They were winning
Yeah,
9 games, 10 games. He just couldn't win that one game,
they
and
went to the Sugar Bowl.
you kind of see it happening now with the other side, right? Ryan Day. All of a
Yep.
sudden, he's winning 10, 11 games a year, but he can't beat the one team that matters. And as Eric's about to tell you, Ohio State fans are kind of losing patience with them.
But I really don't know who they would go out and hire. There's not a natural fit to be like, hey, you're the top coach now, so go and be a national champion. Like, I don't see that coach out there in the wings. Like, Luke Fickle already accepted his job at Wisconsin. I know Ohio State can get anybody they want, but
Yeah,
I don't see that natural progression. Like you could say, oh, it's just steal Lincoln Riley from USC, but USC is joining the Big Ten Conference. So
Mhm.
there isn't a natural fit to replace Ryan Day. I think that's the best chance they got at this particular moment.
We may think that, but unless he beats
Yeah.
Michigan, we're going to find out soon. I mean, that's a what, top three, top four job in the country, Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? There probably is an NFL coach that might want to pounce to that opportunity too that we're not even thinking about. So
Hmm.
who knows what'll happen? But again, Ryan Day will probably surprise us all and go undefeated, and then hold up the
Right.
national title at the very end and be like, "Hey, well, why are you guys worried?" And then Michigan fans are just suddenly back on the this was the best Jim Harbaugh team of all time, and they still lost the big game, and they missed the
Right.
college football playoff. They lost to Penn State too. Like, I mean, it's he could go right back on the hot seat just as quick as he got off of it.
Yeah. Another reason I can't wait for this season. I just want to see how it plays out.
Yes, this is so exciting, and we've only scratched the surface with the Big Ten East. Next episode will be about the Big Ten West. But right now, we have an awesome interview with Eric from the OHIO podcast. They are also part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. We'll check back in after that interview, and thanks again for listening. This is the Illinicast, part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. What is going on? Austin from the Illinicast alongside Sunny, and we have Eric Boggs from the Ohio podcast. We're both part of the Big Banter Podcast Network. How's it going, Eric?
It's going well. Thanks for having us in. Austin, Sonny, good to see you again, my man.
Appreciate you joining us today, Eric.
Absolutely.
So, Eric, let's get this started with what's blowing up the college football world right now, and that's realignment. What are your initial thoughts on the potential additions of four schools in the West and whatever is going on in the ACC?
So I am a huge traditionalist, guys. I'm old school, man. Like I remember the the idea of winning the Big Ten and going to the Rose Bowl, and that meant everything. And with the addition of the college football playoff, well, first with the BCS, then the college football playoff, and now the extended playoff and college football alignment, it's definitely not the world I grew up in. It is a whole new world, and it is NFL light. Let's just call it like it is, man. It really is. It's the minor leagues for the NFL now, and I'm really worried, Austin, to be completely honest with you, that we are losing some of the great traditions that made college football special. I still expect there to be, dotting the I in Script, Ohio and Columbus. I still expect the bands and the cheerleaders and all of those things to be there, but the feel of college football is changing so rapidly. We started our podcast 5 years ago, and in just those 5 years, the things that have changed from our first episode to where we're at today, it feels like almost a completely different sport that we're covering. And when you take that away and you just look at the dollars and cents, I like what the Big Ten is doing to compete and stay relevant into the future, which is good for Ohio State. It's good for the Illini. It's good for the traditional Big Ten schools. Thank goodness for that. But it's not the same sport, Austin, that I grew up watching.
I joke around with my friends all the time that, every evening, whenever, I think about what I'm grateful for, the first thing is, of course, the health of my family and kids, but second is that Illinois was a founding member of the Big Ten.
Right?
Because otherwise, there's no way we would be on the outside looking in. And like you said, I like the idea of the whole realignment thing. Just the practice of it has me hooked, but it's losing the innocence that college football had compared to the professional counterparts.
Yep.
And there's obviously nothing we can do about it. It's not about college sports anymore. It's all about TV ratings, and we're kind of at the mercy of ABC, NBC, CBS, and ESPN.
Do you think maybe the Big Ten though can trade Northwestern? Is that a possibility? Can we make that happen? I mean, I know you guys got to agree with me. I know that's your rival and everything, but at this point, can't we just trade them away somewhere?
I mean,
I
Austin
mean,
made
we
a
have.
joke earlier, but
We have possession of the hat right now, so now is the best time. So it's not going to rot away at Northwestern's trophy case, whatever, wherever that is.
we
I
can
didn't.
just talk about swapping them back out with the University of Chicago. We'll see if they want to go back into athletics. They were a founding member, so
Yeah.
let's contact their athletic department.
I mean, it might be a little dangerous going to that campus, but eh, what's life without a little risk
Right.
involved, right?
It'll bring you more excitement than Ryan Field. So,
This is true. This is true.
but all right, Eric, let's talk about some Ohio State football. I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna start it off. I'm gonna ask you a question. I want to know your honest opinion. Gun to your head. The college gods have blessed you with the ability to change the result of any game or one of these two games from last season. Do you A, turn it around against Michigan? You win that game against Michigan, but still lose in the college football playoff against Georgia? Or do you get to beat Georgia last year, still lose to Michigan, but then you go on to the college football final, where I would assume you would have been a pretty heavy favorite over TCU? What say you?
So this is what makes Buckeye Nation insane, right? Most people are going to tell you, yeah, of course we'll trade a loss to our rival for a national title. But here's the thing about that national title. If you don't beat that team up north, because we don't like to even mention their names, if you don't beat them on your way to winning that national title, it's going to feel hollow. And so I know it's crazy. I know
Wow.
but the disdain that we have for all things maize and blue is real, man. It is real. The rivalry is it's not a rivalry, it's a hatred. Like I have very let me tell you a quick story. So
Please.
after my divorce, I re-entered the dating field in my 30s. Okay? And I hadn't gone on a date since I was in college, which was in 2000, okay? And so I'm out there on all the dating sites and meeting people, and I refused to go on a date with someone who was a Michigan fan. Won't do it. You see the remember the ESPN commercial where the guy's in the car with the girl and he finds out she's a Michigan fan, he opens the door and jumps out,
That's
you
based on you, huh?
well, yeah, I could relate to that, I guess you could say. No, I would definitely say let's beat the team up north and I can live with the Georgia fans rubbing it in our face, which they have. Um, but because they know we had them, man. We had them on the ropes. Some things
I
didn't go
know.
our way, but I cannot stand losing to that team up north, man.
Not just
I can't
losing.
stand
I
it.
mean, let's be honest. I'm not trying to pick
Oh,
at a scab here. That wasn't very close.
it was a royal beatdown, dude. Like
Yeah.
like we got spanked by daddy twice. Twice.
Yeah.
And that hurts, man. Like that hurts bad.
I have a question about this year's Ohio State team. Where does Marvin Harrison Jr. rank in your rankings of skill players that you've seen at the University of Ohio State?
He's up there, dude. Like I mean, every time we have a good receiver, we have the debate of where does he rank all time because obviously it starts with like Chris Carter, right? Like he was the first real receiver at Ohio State to get national attention and we had Paul Warfield, but that was in an era where they didn't really throw the football much, and he went on to had a great NFL career as a Hall of Famer. But Chris Carter was the first real receiver at Ohio State, and so everything is based off of him. And so then you have guys in the '90s like Joey Galloway and David Boston. These guys were great. They went on to had good NFL careers. But even they were still like, hey, Chris Carter's number one. And then all of a sudden, you have this influx of receiver talent under Urban Meyer that just explodes. And it's year after year after year of having tremendous guys. And I think when it's going to be all said and done, if he has the year this year that is like last year, even though he might not have the records because he's going to go to the NFL a year early, I still think Marvin Harrison Jr., when it's all said and done, is the most all around best receiver that we've ever had at Ohio State, to be completely honest. And I don't like to usually do that. I'll go back more to the guys in the 80s, 90s, 70s and say these were the I mean, when you have Archie Griffin, the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner, right?
Right.
Like it's like, hey, where does Zeke rate? He's not even in top 5, man. He's not. I mean,
Yeah.
you got
Wow.
Eddie George and all these guys. And but I'm not blowing smoke up your guys' butts. Marvin Harrison Jr. is that good. He could be number one in our program history when it's all said and done if he has a great year.
That's wild. Just considering the names that you're naming
Yeah.
both in the past, but even especially in recent memory,
Yeah.
it's
Garrett
top 10.
Wilson, Olave.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the joke
Jackson.
the joke on our podcast was that Olave was my sixth grade dance shirt. It was smooth. That was the running joke on the podcast. But here's the thing, man. Like, it seems like as soon as you get one, you're like, oh, he's the best. Ryan Hartline develops another one. But
Yeah.
I really, and here's what's scary. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get all the attention, right? Don't forget Emeka Egbuka was rated much higher than him
Yeah.
coming out of that class. He's for real, guys. And we have Julian Fleming's healthy coming into this season. He was the number one ranked receiver the class before. And of course, we got a couple 5-star freshmen that are coming up. So the train keeps rolling in the receiver room thanks to Brian Hartline.
Austin, I don't know about you, but this conversation made me a little angry. We don't. We're just. We got a 4-star signing with us last year, and we were fist pumping, and he's almost a topic of our training camp focuses this year. So I don't share the enthusiasm for 5 stars. Well, one day we'll get there, but we'll see. But speaking of receivers,
Yeah.
this year, who's throwing it to him?
Oh. Okay, so here we just opened camp today. Everybody thought, for the most part, that Kyle McCord was going to get the first crack. Here's the reason why. He's been on campus. This will be his third year. Okay. So he's got one more year experience than anybody else in the program. He was high school teammates with Marvin Harrison Jr. So
Mhm.
there's already that chemistry that was there. But Devin Brown is not going to let this thing go easily. He is confident. He has a swagger about him. He is a little bit more athletic. Like the players themselves, when they're asked, will tell you that his escapability is really good. And given the fact that our offensive line is going to take a major step back this year, we're going to need somebody who can use his feet, which hasn't happened at Ohio State since Urban was here. Um, we haven't had a quarterback that really can get you the first down on third down with his feet. And so that might be critical given the fact that we're starting 2 new tackles. And it's been a few years since that's happened. And if the spring game was any indication of their talent level, Sonny, woo, they are in trouble. We were counting, Chris and I from the podcast, every every single snap. It was 2 seconds or less before our defensive line was getting to the quarterback with just a 4-man rush. That was not a blitz or anything. Now, does that mean our defensive line might be really good? I hope so. I hope so, because it's been since 2019 since we've really had a pass rush that has changed an offense. And if we can get that, then that bodes well for what Ohio State can do this season. But if that offensive line truly is that bad, if they're that weak, son, we're going to need a quarterback. We might need all four of our quarterbacks this year because they're going to get killed.
That's
So,
wild to me.
what is,
Go ahead, Jose.
yeah, what is the reasoning behind the offensive line taking a step back? Is it youth or is it recruiting?
Both. There was Coach Strudrawa was the offensive line coach, and he coached for LSU back when they won their national championship. And he was an Ohio guy. He coached with Urban Meyer at Bowling Green. And so when Urban came, he brought Coach Stud with him. Coach Stud had some health issues. He had back surgery. He couldn't get out and recruit. And then Kevin Wilson, who's now the head coach at Tulsa, who was our OC, he kind of filled in, even though he was our tight end and OC, tight end coach and offensive coordinator. He filled in for Coach Stud. Well, that really affected our recruiting because unless they were a local Ohio kid who was good, we weren't getting them. Um, it just seemed like we would get one good offensive lineman a year and then a bunch of developmental guys. Well, a lot of those developmental guys have left. They've hit the portal, they're gone. So we had to raid the portal for offensive line depth, and it's just not looking good, man. Like there was a gap in their recruiting. And we can it seems like we can recruit every position really really well except for the offensive line. The last couple of years has just not gone our way, which is funny because you would think in the Midwest you should clean up on offensive line recruiting with Wisconsin and Iowa boys, corn-fed boys. I mean, you guys find them, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
develop them. It seems like every
Mhm.
Big Ten team can develop offensive linemen, and unless you come in as a 5-star at Ohio State, the last time we developed an offensive line that had 3-star guys who elevated their play was 2014 when we won the national championship. We had two local 3-star kids from Ohio that elevated their play, became NFL linemen. And since then, we haven't really developed them.
No. I'm just circling back to thinking about
No problem.
you talking about how you haven't had a running quarterback or someone who can get yardage with the runs since Urban Meyer.
Yeah.
When I'm a
JT
Chicago
Barrett,
Bears fan, I'm a Chicago Bears fan, so I
Justin
see
Fields.
Justin
Yeah.
Fields just running for rushing record after rushing record. It's I don't know. I just found that funny because now it's like we're not sure if he's
But
what kind of
but if
passer
you
he is.
if you remember, he didn't let Justin Fields run until the big games.
Right. No, no, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, it
And
might be a Ryan Day thing.
the reason behind that was because he had zero confidence in the backup at the time. And
Um,
so it was like, Justin, don't get hurt. So
yeah.
don't run. So he wouldn't run until it was the big games, and then he would pull it and run. And
Yeah.
remember, against Clemson when he pulled it and ran,
Clemson.
about
Yeah.
got broken in half. That's
Uh-huh.
why.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so Ryan Day, his philosophy, where Urban Meyer was like, I'll run until your legs fall off.
Yeah.
Like JT Barrett, like I don't care that you can't throw the football. Can you run a read option and give me 2 or 3 yards? Yes. Okay, we're going. So that's the difference of philosophy between Urban and Day at the quarterback position. And if you ask me what I want Justin Fields back because he had both, right? He could do both and he did both very well. But at the end of the day, I just don't feel like Ryan Day let him be him.
Hmm.
It was hey, you need to learn how to throw, stay in the pocket, look for your progression of your receivers, get out of the pocket, scramble to throw, don't scramble to run. And it was really hard for him to pull the reins back on Justin. But then CJ Stroud's like, I'm good with that, man. I
Yeah.
won't run
Right.
ever until Georgia, and then all of a sudden it was like, where was this at the whole time?
Yeah.
Eric, final question for you. What is your prediction for Ohio State this year, and do they make the college football playoff?
So I think the Big Ten is going to be freaky weird this year. Um, I think Wisconsin is going to be dangerous. Like if you tell me what game scares me the most as a Buckeye fan right now, it's the trip to Madison. Luke Fickle, former Buckeye, bled scarlet and gray. Dude's gonna have it out for us because he
Oh yeah.
didn't even get a phone call from Gene
Hmm.
Smith, the athletic director. Never even called him up to get an interview from him when the position was available. You don't think Luke Fickle, whose ultimate dream was to coach at his alma mater, isn't going to take that personal? I promise you, he is. That game scares the heck out of me. You have an Iowa team now that all of a sudden has some offensive weapons. Will Brian Ferentz destroy those too, though? Like, I mean, does he break those toys like he's broken everything in Iowa City offensively? You've got you guys, and I know one of the things, the questions you had written down for me was, what's the perspective, of Illinois? Like, we look at what Brett, or we call him Bert, but
Yeah.
what he's got, and we're like,
Yeah.
dude, that's a dangerous team. Look what they did in Ann Arbor last year. Like
We know.
that was for real.
Yeah.
Like that's a scary team, you know? The West is wild. And then over in the East, here's what's crazy, dude. I think Maryland is going to shock some people. I really do. I think Talia Tagovailoa is in my opinion the best returning quarterback in the Big 10. I know he throws some interceptions, but look the weapons he had. He had to. He had to take chances. You put that kid on a better roster, that is a CFP quarterback, in my opinion. And I think this is the year that Maryland, and according to Mike Loxley, they're ready to compete for championships. So this is
Yeah.
the year Maryland's going to shock somebody. I hope it's not us, but I think they're going to shock one of the big three in the East. Um, I also believe that Penn State is for real. Like their depth is really, really. They've been recruiting really well the last 4 or 5 years, and their depth is there now. Their offensive line is much better. Um, how fast will Drew Aller how fast will he be able to pick up that offense and get things moving for them on that side of the football. And of course, Ann Arbor team up north, they're returning a lot. They think they're world beaters. We'll find out. Um, it's going to be crazy. So here's my prediction. I think there's going to be four Big Ten teams go 11-1 this year. I do.
Are we one of
I
them?
come on, Sonny.
Uh,
Be realistic. I
okay.
think there's four Big
Wow.
Ten teams that go 11-1. I think Wisconsin's one of them. I think
Really?
I
Wow.
yeah, I
Year
think
one.
yeah, I do. I think Iowa goes somewhere around 10-2. I think that there will be five Big 10 teams in the top 15, 16 in the nation at the end of the year. And I think Michigan, ugh, I can't say that word. I hate that. Penn State and Ohio State all go 11-1. And
Wow.
who goes to the championship? Because I think we all beat each other.
Right.
And which team goes to the Big Ten championship at that point is based on several factors. One of which, who has the best record in non-conference, and if you all go 3-0, whose non-conference opponents have the best records. So this might actually be a good year for us to play a Notre Dame, because if
Yeah.
you look at that team up north's non-conference schedule, it is sad.
Yeah. It's
It
high
is
school
sad.
teams.
Sad. So my prediction is 11-1. I think we go back to the Big Ten championship based off of that. I think we have a rematch with Wisconsin, whose one loss is us, and hopefully we can win again and go to the CFP. But it all boils down, in my opinion, to our offensive line. It doesn't matter how good our quarterback is. If our offensive line is not up to par, none of it matters. It doesn't.
Well, I mean,
Thank you,
if
Eric.
Eric, let us know where can the people find you.
We're everywhere, man. Where wherever you get your podcast, if you want to listen to the audio version, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Store, Amazon. Gosh, I don't know. We might even be on Kiss FM for all I know. Um, just look us up, The Ohio Podcast. Um, we're on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, The Ohio Podcast. You can find us there. Everything we do now is in video format as well. So if you're interested in that, but yeah, absolutely check us out. And thank you again, Sonny, for joining us for your Illini for our Illini preview. That was a lot of fun. So we're going through that right now. I think we got 8 of them published already and 6 to go.
I've been watching all of them. I suggest all of you guys do the same. And Eric, let's not let this be the last time we collab.
Sounds good. I mean, when we play each other for that stupid Illini Illabuck
The
trophy.
historic, the historic,
Oh my
the
gosh,
proud Illinicast trophy.
you guys got some terrible trophies. The hat and the Illabuck. What's going on, man?
We're still working on the whole tradition thing.
thank thank you once again, Eric. It's been a blast.
You're welcome, Austin. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Take care.
What an episode, Sonny. That was an awesome interview with Eric, and 3 teams finishing 11-1 in the Big Ten East. That's
I
kind
mean,
of crazy.
but it can happen, right? Michigan plays
Yes.
at Penn State. Penn State plays at Ohio State, and Ohio State plays at Michigan. So it's like, I mean, it'd be wild if it happened, but it's the last year of divisions, the last year before college football goes crazy. So why not?
And I feel like his analysis of Wisconsin going 11-1 is a little premature. Seems like
All
a
right.
square peg in a round hole, at least in year 1. I know Luke Fickell will bring in his guys and his talent coming in to future years, but this is a Wisconsin team that was built on the backs of Barry Alvarez, continuing on to Jim Leonard, continuing on to Brett Bielema and Paul Chryst. I mean, you can't just expect an air raid style offense right away. I know we'll get to it a little bit later in the Big Ten West podcast, but again, I think this is all premature. The celebrations of Luke Fickell and what he's going to do with this offense in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, again, as you said, we'll talk a little more in depth next week. But I love the Fickle hire. I think, you know, I would have loved for him to even consider Illinois. I don't think he even gave us a second glance if we reached out. But
Right.
in year 1, I don't know if I share the enthusiasm that Eric did. But we'll see.
Now, again, like I said, identity and consistency, and I think that's what Illinois brings to the table. So Indianapolis bound still.
And
But
a
we'll get
simple,
into it.
yeah, yeah. Simple reminder: if you want to see this Indianapolis-bound Illinois football team, do me a favor: go to our YouTube page, hit like, hit subscribe, take a screenshot of it, and send it to me at Illinicast. I'm giving away 2 tickets to every single game this season. I'll take care of parking for you. Just that's all you have to do. We'll announce a winner before kickoff of each game, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the stadium.
All right, last word, Sonny. Do the Cubs take the series against the Blue Jays?
Is David Ross still managing? We're on a roll. We're on a roll, but sometimes at the end of games, he just it's like, what are you doing? So I'm gonna say yes because I think this is a special team. But after last night's game, it's a simple reminder that the specialness of a team may still be overcome by the tomfoolery of their manager.
I agree. I still think they take 2 or 3 just because they have Justin Steele pitching in this series. So they're going to take 2 or 3, continue on to the NL Central crown at the end of the year. Sonny, I want to thank you again for being my co-pilot. Once again, it's always great to see your face on the Illinicast podcast.
And again, a special thank you to Eric from the OHIO podcast. The season's coming up, so you're going to be seeing us collab with all the other teams every week. And, Austin and I are going to try to make this a twice a week podcast in the near future. And again, if you can just subscribe, like, you'll know when a new episode is out. And we look forward to watching the Illinois football season with you.
All right. See you, Sonny. Have a good weekend.
Take care, sir.